Welcome inside Gillette Stadium once again, everybody. My name is Mike Petraglia, joined as always by Patriots expert columnist for WEEI.com on a compressed week, no less, Christopher Price. They are setting up behind us for Thursday night football here at Gillette Stadium. The Patriots 6-0 taking on the newly inspired, shall we say, 3-3 Miami Dolphins under interim head coach Dan Campbell. Chris, one thing's for sure, they are the Miami Dolphins with a lot more venom.
Yeah, they are. I think you need to take into account the opposition that they faced the last 2 weeks. They're facing a Tennessee team that's clearly not ready for prime time and a Houston team that's melting down before our very eyes. But at the same time, you can't penalize a team for their schedule. So they've looked very good over the last 2 weeks, especially when you compare it to what they were able to put on film over the first 4 weeks. Is going to be a challenge because you're facing a new head coach. So it's a bit of an unknown quantity here. You know the players, you know the tendencies, you know some of the schemes, but in terms of how they're being coached, it's going to be a little bit of a change going from Joe Philbin to Dan Campbell.
Asked Bill Belichick on the conference call yesterday about the newfangled Miami defense and Ndamukong Suh and Cameron Wake. That's where the pass rush really begins. 10 sacks over the last 2 games against those 2 opponents that you mentioned. And then I asked Tom Brady about Belichick's comments about this being simplified. It can go one of 2 ways, I think, Chris. Simplified, all the fans tweeted me saying, well, Tom Brady's going to eat up a simple defense. Or B, now the Dolphins are playing like they have nothing to lose. What do you think it is?
I think it's going to be a little bit more of the latter than the former. I think the biggest thing for them defensively, it's clear over the last 2 games, Suh has bought in to whatever's been going on. The first 4 games, he didn't look like the kind of dominant defensive force that they paid upwards of $100 million for. I think now the last 2 games, he, for whatever reason, is starting to click with Dan Campbell in his defensive scheme. If you're the Patriots, that front 4 is impressive. It's very, very impressive. But that group of linebackers, they can still be beaten. Even the performance over the last 2 weeks tells me that the Patriots are primed to attack that second level with those, whether it's Julian Edelman, Dion Lewis if he's available, Rob Gronkowski. There are winnable matchups there at that second level for the Patriots. But again, that front 4, that's going to be the first priority for the Patriots offense.
And as Brady reminded me here on Tuesday, we have to make sure we don't do what we did in Miami last year. They got out to the halftime lead in that season opener. Then they fell behind in the second half, and it was Katie bar the door. They could not stop the Miami pass rush, and that was without Ndamukong Suh on their roster. So obviously, really, I think the strategy here is get the early lead. It sounds simplistic, but against a team like Miami, you don't want to give them a window.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, falls under the umbrella that we've always talked about, good complementary football. It's not just getting out to an early lead and setting the tempo and putting that defense back on their heels. One of the biggest things that we've seen from this Dolphins team first 4 weeks to the last 2 weeks is the inclusion of Lamar Miller, a guy who, to my mind, is one of the better young running backs in the league. For whatever reason, Joe Philbin decided not to utilize him all that heavily. Last 2 weeks, Campbell has leaned on him extensively. He's the kind of guy who, if you fall behind, he can grind out some of that tough yardage, he can move the chains, and he can keep that clock moving. We always talk about how the secret to success against the Patriots is control the ball, keep Tom Brady off the field. Lamar Miller, if he is able to continue to run like we've seen him over the last 2 weeks, he's able to do that kind of work on Thursday night against this Patriots defense, then that's going to be one of those things where, if you're starting to talk about a Miami victory, those are one of those things that has to happen for Miami to be able to come out of this thing with a win.
Gee, a running game, a pass rush. This sounds a lot like the New York Jets team that the Patriots had trouble with on Sunday. I think they're going to have trouble again on Thursday night. I'm not saying they're not going to win the game, but in terms of the matchups, the Dolphins do a lot of the same things that the Jets do.
Yeah, I think that the one difference there is the back end of that Miami defense isn't as good. I think that when you look at the back end of the New York defense, you have Revis, you have Cromartie, you have Pryor, you have some guys there who've been able to put Gilchrist, some guys who've been able to put some good things on film. You look at the Miami secondary, it's not as good as that group. I think it can be beaten. Like we said, also the coverage linebackers, I don't think they're nearly as good as what the Patriots have seen over the course of the first 6 games. I think those are winnable matchups for New England. But I'm glad that you bring up the Jets analogy, because the Jets last Sunday, that was their first opportunity to kind of punch up in weight class a little bit. Right. They almost run the table, except with a loss to Philly, against some subpar teams. I think you can make the same kind of analogy when you're talking about this Dolphins team. This Dolphins team now, after beating Houston and Tennessee, this is their chance to go up against a really quality opponent. It's going to be interesting to see how they respond.
Have to bring up a news item. The NFL files its appeal of Judge Berman's decision that essentially did wipe out for now the 4-game Tom Brady Deflategate suspension. But there was no mention of it in Tuesday's press conference with Tom Brady. any chance that it is even on the radar of Brady and the Patriots?
No, because it doesn't have anything to do. The first hearing is not scheduled to be heard until after the end of the season, after the end of the Super Bowl. So it's not even on the radar at this point. It's a week-to-week thing. It would be different if, say, the first, the court hearing was going to be held in November or December. Then it would be a different matter. But I think as it stands right now, that's a matter for the offseason. We can all spend a whole lot of time in the offseason writing more and more about Deflategate. It is a curse. It's a blessing and a curse for us in the media, because you look at it as a story that's just, it's going to continue to generate headlines, it's going to continue to generate page views because people are going to be interested in it. But the bad thing is, it's not going to go away. We're going to keep writing about it and writing about it and writing about it.
It really does remind you of how much a blinders on focus really takes place here at Gillette Stadium. The Patriots are all focused about trying to improve to 7-0. They would be the first team to get to 7-0. They had the bye week, and then I know you wrote on weei.com that the Patriots are really in the midst of a stretch now. The 4 games in 19 days. They've handled it before. They lost in Kansas City last year to start that stretch, won their next 3 games. You're pretty confident they're going to do likewise again.
Yeah, in a lot of ways, this team, when you look back at each team that's had that stretch, that 4 games in 18 days, 19-day stretch, that's really defined this team. They've done it a handful of times over the course of the last decade or so. Last year was obviously the clearest case, where you saw the Kansas City game. They got their doors blown off in Kansas City. They rebounded. They went 3-1. That kind of set the tone for the rest of the year. So far to this point, this is the tail end of that stretch. If they're able to come out of this 4-0, I think that certainly sets a positive tone for this team going into the second half of the season. If they're able to go to 7-0, not only that, but they're able to go to 3-0 in the division. That's the first really mountain for that team to climb. When you're talking about, different plateaus to reach, you win the division. You set it a level of dominance in the division with 3 wins right out of the gate. You got to feel good about where you are.
And what happens on Thursday night?
I think New England ends up winning this thing. I think that the Dolphins have done an awful lot of good things over the last couple of weeks, and I think they've certainly got things pointed in the right direction. But I think coming in here against the defending Super Bowl champions on a short week is an awful tough challenge for a young Miami team. I think New England's going to end up winning this thing. I'm going to say 28-14.
All right. We'll have complete coverage, as we always do, on weei.com. Ryan Hannibal, Christopher Price, and yours truly, Inside Gillette. We'll have all of the description and the coverage of what should be an interesting game, I think. Again, Chris, I think they're going to get tested, but again, I agree with you. I think the Patriots come out on top. Inside Gillette Stadium, he is Christopher Price. I'm Mike Petraglia, weei.com.